Welcome back. The Automobile Association of South Africa says it welcomes decreases of fuel prices as motorists are expected to get some relief at the pumps in September. Although the fuel prices are still higher than January levels, it'll be a breather for most motorists. In a statement, the AA has quoted the Central Energy Fund's figures where the ULP 95 petrol is expected to be lower by around R2.35 a litre, while the ULP 93 is set for a drop of around R2.18 per litre. Diesel is expected to drop by between 77 and 87 cents a litre, while illuminating paraffin will drop by around 82 cents a litre. For more on this, we joined via Zoom by Layton Beard. He is the spokesperson for the Automobile Association of South Africa. Layton, a very good evening, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to SA Today.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
You know, the announcement of a possible decrease at the pumps has been welcomed with so much glee, especially the petrol motorists. Well, even though the diesel motorists are not so happy, but it is a welcome relief for all. So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think anytime you get a decrease, especially one, and let's be very frank about this, I mean, 70 to 80 cents a litre reduction is significant. So when you talk about a R2.35 reduction, that's actually very substantial. It's not an increase, which we've seen, unfortunately, too often this year. It's a decrease, and in our view, definitely something that has to be welcomed.
Well, the fact that South Africa is a price taker, in the international, prices of fuel, does this perhaps not help the consumer in terms of cushioning them against the adverse effect of fuel increases?
No, I mean, we are absolutely at the mercy of two main factors: the rand's strength against the US dollar and international petroleum prices. So when international oil prices are high, we will feel that in our pockets locally. So, geopolitical developments that happen thousands of kilometers away in other countries that will impact on the oil prices are going to have an impact on us locally, and we need to understand that. In the same way, factors that influence the rand's strength against the US dollar are also going to have an impact on us personally as consumers. So, and for those reasons, it's very difficult to predict what will happen to the fuel price going forward, because both of those factors are incredibly volatile. I mean, we've seen in the last 2 weeks, the rand was trading at one stage at 16.16 to the US dollar. Today, it's in the band of around 17.20 to 17.30. So it changes quite significantly over a short period of time. And because of that, we see these fluctuations, and we see these increases and decreases. Fortunately, the rand strength against the dollar on average in August was good, and that's the reason why it isn't impacting negatively against the fuel price. And international petroleum prices have also been on a downward trend, which again has benefited local consumers.
And having said that, is it then correct to assume that this exposes it to, the volatility that arises from the imbalance between the international demand and the supply of crude oil? Can the authorities change the status quo?
Locally, the South African government has very little wiggle room in terms of international petroleum prices and the rand-US dollar exchange rate. Those are factors largely beyond the government's control. In the case of international oil, they've got no control and no input there at all. In the case of the rand-US dollar exchange rate, obviously creating a climate of certainty, of policy certainty, of bureaucratic red tape being cut, creating a climate of investment. These are the types of things that influence the rand-US dollar exchange rate, but it's also impacted by other factors that are external. So we understand it. And it's for that reason that we've been saying, let's look at those factors that we can control. And what are those factors that we can control on the fuel price and that we do have any influence over in terms of our own local fuel pricing? And one of those we feel is the structure of the fuel price and the way its components are added to the fuel price. And so for that reason, we've been calling for a review and an interrogation of all of those components on the fuel price. So, in answer to your question, no, but there are factors that we think we can control and that we need to look at more intently.
And perhaps one of those factors is the fuel levy. Remember that South Africa has a fuel levy, which is a component of the retail price of fuel and a major source of tax revenue. So what's your reflections then on the argument that the government levies are, I would call it artificially inflating the fuel prices while the government's government response is temporary and inadequate?
Look, I think that the fuel levies have increased too significantly over the last 10 years. And it's one of the reasons why the AA every year calls on government not to increase those levies. So they are at high levels. The problem with the levies is that if you, in the case of the general fuel levy, were to just scrap that fuel levy, it generates 90 billion rand plus to the fiscus annually. And government is not going to want to see that revenue disappear. So if we scrap the fuel levy, in our view, government will just simply look for alternative ways to generate that money. Mm-hmm. It may look for alternative taxing methods, or it may increase existing taxes. And that's going to benefit nobody. Instead, what we're saying is, in terms of the levies, it's a question of allocation. How is that money appropriated? Is it correctly spent? Are all the checks and balances that need to be there to prevent corruption and graft in place? These are the types of things that we think need to happen in terms of that fuel levy. In terms of the road accident fund levy, we believe there is some space to cut on that. And it comes down to this issue of why we have this over-reliance on the RAF in the first place. It's because our road safety in South Africa is so poor. There's not enough education and awareness campaigns, nor is there enough consequences for offenders. So that situation needs to change. But certainly in terms of the management of the RAF and the claims management processes at the Road Accident Fund, we believe there are some significant changes that could result in savings to that levy. But those are two components on the fuel price. There are others that we think also need to be interrogated.
All right, Layton, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.